The forests of British Columbia are important to us all. They are important to our economy. They are important for aesthetic reasons. They are important for recreation. During the past decade, environmentalists and the media have made us even more aware of the value of our forests. There's increasing pressure to set more forest land aside for uses that would exclude logging. At the same time, pressure has been growing for the cutting of more timber to keep our mills operating. Much of the lifestyle that we have come to expect is based on revenue generated by the forest industry. Everyone in British Columbia benefits from the harvest of the forest resource. However, we depend on the forest for more than jobs alone. We take the forest for granted, and we also take an abundant supply of clean water for granted. The forests also provide a sanctuary for our wildlife. Man, too, seeks a sanctuary in the wilderness. Hiking, hunting, fishing, or a family picnic beside a mountain stream are all activities that we in British Columbia enjoy. As the demands on the dwindling forest base escalate, there is need for a strategy to seek compromise among the various parties wanting access to the forests. Public process requires negotiation, doing the necessary homework, and trying to clarify your personal, agency, or group goals. It also requires understanding the goals of the individuals or groups sitting across the table from you. It is not an easy process, nor a quick process. Involvement of citizens in the process of forest resource management is a professional activity. Effective public involvement requires thorough preparation, rigorous process, and careful evaluation in exactly the same way that you would address the planning and management of the resources themselves. Forestry officials will have to design and conduct public involvement activities systematically, and industry and the public will have to understand exactly what their role is in the process. Many people, both provincially and locally, will have to be contacted during the critical initial research phase of citizen participation. As forestry officials complete the research phase and begin to design a public involvement program, it will be important to bear in mind that no single approach will work for all situations. Local circumstances require that each situation be treated differently. Just as a forester needs to be sensitive to the site conditions in planning a harvesting and reforestation program, he needs to be sensitive to the human situation in order to plan an effective public involvement program. Some concerns will affect large regions of the province, such as the mountain pine beetle infestation in the East Kootenays. Other concerns will affect a single community watershed, such as in the Blewett area. The South Moresby Island area in the Queen Charlottes is another area of confrontation. Logs are required to keep the mills running. But there are also many who see this region as a potential wilderness park, a land to set aside for future generations. To many, it is a land of freedom, of soaring eagles, of rivers full of salmon. The trees on the Charlottes are important to both the local economy and the economy of all of British Columbia. It will be up to the South Moresby planning team to come up with recommendations for a compromise to meet as many of the conflicting needs as possible. There are many places in the province where there are conflicts for use of forest lands, for recreation, as watersheds, for harvesting by the forest industry, for agricultural uses, for residential uses, and for hydroelectric projects. There is a dwindling land base for all forest resource uses. Can the public involvement process help reach the compromises that will be required in forestry planning during the coming decade?
My only concern, and I mean this, is that I hope this just isn't an academic exercise or a useless exercise, and that is really a concern I have, that they're just doing this as a SOP, which can happen in lots of places, and I hope that that can be prevented from happening, but so much depends on timing. You know, there's so many factors. The public process is absolutely vital. I just don't think it's enough of it happening. And it has to be meaningful. It can't be just an exercise to make it look like, and that's the thing that bothers me, is exercises go on like this all the time, where it looks like the public really is having input. All the while, you wake up one morning and find, fait accompli, they've done it to us, you know, and that scares me. That's what I'm worried about.
One of the responsibilities that I think the Forest Service has is to educate the public, and I really mean that in a very positive way, not a brainwashing sense, but in the course of examining certain issues, make available to the members of your advisory committee or whatever literature and information that may be available on some of the subjects that are under discussion, and give them the opportunity to do a little independent study on it. So this is really extremely important, and something I think we have to get across to the public. This is not a public relations exercise. This is not a brainwashing exercise. This is a genuine, legitimate harnessing of group intelligence and striving for the best possible decision. Mm-hmm. And we're not trying to convince them of this, that, or the other thing. All we're trying to do is to present them with the facts and let logic do its thing.
There are 3 necessary phases in the design of public involvement events sponsored by the Forest Service. First is the research phase, where issues are identified and background information is gathered that would be required for action. The design phase would set objectives and limitations, develop a program and a working plan for action. And finally, there would be implementation of the work plan, coordination, logistical support, monitoring, and evaluation. There are 3 components of public involvement. The first component is public information. This can be provided by the Ministry of Forests through press releases, fact pamphlets, technical papers, making maps available in a regional viewing center, or organizing field trips.
However, wilderness advocates cannot be accommodated. By definition,
the second component of public involvement is consultation. Consultation through releasing of position papers, receiving written briefs, working plan reviews, or holding public workshops, such as the Mountain Pine Beetle Workshop in the East Kootenays. Public meetings, such as a recent meeting in Princeton, helped provide a forum for discussion of forestry issues. The third component of participation can be considered as extended involvement in the planning process. This can be done through a public advisory committee, task groups, or joint planning teams. As Joe Tress of Crestbrook Forest Industries says,
it hasn't cost anything to have the public involvement. All it meant was that we have to have time and we had to have good planning, which you should have in any operation. You couldn't afford to take any shortcuts. But the steps is to establish what the main objectives are of the community, and if in fact the company can meet those objectives. Mm-hmm. The other thing is to establish direct lines of communication between the Forest Service, the timber company involved, and the community. Working bodies from each agency, and then from then on, those three heads work to those objectives. If you can do that, then it'll work. Or it should, as long as you can meet those objectives.
I'm afraid of it still because it's run by the Forest Service. No matter, what they've told us about it, it still frightens me a little that that's kind of where the bias starts.
I'm one of the resource users in the area as a rancher, and I'm vitally concerned with what might happen to the viability of my operation if I were denied the use of these resources.
As orchardist Tillman Naum, a member of the Kelowna Fish and Game Club and member of the Greystokes Task Group, says,
I think that eventually we're going to make certain trade-offs in the area, each for his own interest, because it is a multiple-use area. I think that everybody will be able to be accommodated to some degree. But hopefully, I think that the main core area, the really environmentally sensitive area, will be protected, and this is what we're striving for.
Some members of the Forest Service could enter into this kind of a thing with less than total commitment to it. And Lord help us if anybody ever engages in this public involvement process, if they think they're going to manipulate it and sort of use these people. I think there's some very serious problems could arise if anybody ever got wind of that type of thing. You just destroy the credibility of the whole damn process. But as long as people understand what they're up against, and they understand the fact that they have to, if they're going to do it, then they're going to have to do it genuinely, openly, and wholeheartedly. No problem. But God help us if anybody ever tries to play games.
there are no longer any easy answers for our questions of how to use our heritage of forest resources. Most of the decisions these days require some compromises among competing interests. By participating in public involvement events, people are seizing the opportunity to influence how our forest resources are used. Some communities have already achieved results. It may not be a fast process, but it is a vital opportunity for citizens to contribute to the hard choices we all face.